The woman who raised me was a killer. The sound of raindrops hitting the roof filled the small room. The young boy was curled up in his bed, trying to block out the sound of his mother's sobs. He didn't understand why she was crying, but he knew it had something to do with his father. The boy's father had left them when he was just a baby, and he had never met him. But he could sense the pain his mother felt, the way her body shook with each sob. "Mom," he whispered, afraid to disturb her. She turned to him, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry, sweetie. I didn't mean to wake you up." He sat up, rubbing his eyes. "What's wrong, Mom?" She took a deep breath, trying to compose herself. "Your father, he's dead." The boy's heart dropped. He had never met his father, but the thought of him being gone forever was hard to comprehend. "How did he die?" "He was murdered," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The police think it was a robbery gone wrong." The boy didn't know how to respond. He had never been in this situation before. "What are we going to do now?" "We'll be okay," his mother said, trying to sound reassuring. But the boy could see the fear in her eyes. As the days passed, the boy's mother became increasingly distant. She spent most of her time in her room, and when she did emerge, she was always on edge. The boy didn't understand why she was acting this way, but he knew something was wrong. One night, he couldn't sleep. He could hear his mother pacing back and forth in her room. He got out of bed and quietly made his way to her door. He pressed his ear against it, trying to hear what she was saying. "Should have never gotten involved," she whispered. "I should have stayed out of it." The boy's heart was pounding. What was his mother talking about? He pressed his ear closer to the door. "I did what I had to do," his mother continued. "I didn't have a choice." The boy pulled away from the door, his mind racing. What did his mother do? He had always thought of her as a kind and gentle woman, but now he wasn't so sure. The next day, the boy's mother sat him down at the kitchen table. "I need to tell you something," she said, her eyes brimming with tears. The boy braced himself for the worst. "I'm a killer," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The boy's heart stopped. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. "What do you mean?" "I mean I've taken someone's life," his mother said, her voice shaking. "A long time ago, before you were born." The boy didn't know how to react. He had never heard of anything like this before. "Why did you do it?" His mother looked down at the table, tears streaming down her face. "It's a long story. But I want you to know that I regret what I did. I wish I could take it back." The boy didn't know what to say. He felt like he was in a nightmare, but he couldn't wake up. Over the next few weeks, the boy tried to come to terms with what his mother had told him. He couldn't help but feel scared and alone. He didn't know if he could trust his own mother. One day, the boy's mother came home with a black eye. She tried to hide it with makeup, but the boy could see the bruise peeking through. He asked her what happened, but she brushed it off, telling him she had bumped into something. But the boy knew something wasn't right. He couldn't shake the feeling that his mother was in danger. One night, he snuck into his mother's room and went through her things. He found a gun hidden in a drawer, and his heart started racing. Was his mother planning to use it? He didn't know what to do. He wanted to talk to his mother about it, but he was scared. He didn't want to make things worse. The next day, the boy's mother didn't come home. He waited and waited, but she never showed up. He tried calling her, but she didn't answer. As the night wore on, the boy became more and more anxious. He didn't know what to do. He couldn't go to the police, not with what his mother had told him. Finally, in the early hours of the morning, there was a knock on the door. The boy's heart jumped into his throat. He crept to the door and looked through the peephole. It was his mother. He opened the door, relieved. But as soon as she stepped inside, he could see the fear in her eyes. "We have to go," she said, grabbing his hand. "Go where?" he asked, but his mother didn't answer. She just dragged him out of the house and into the car. As they drove, the boy's mother told him everything. She had gotten involved with the wrong people who had threatened to hurt her and her son if she didn't do what they wanted. She had been trying to protect them both, but now she didn't know what to do. The boy was stunned. He had never imagined his mother could be in such danger. They drove for hours, stopping only for gas and food. The boy's mother was always looking over her shoulder, as if she expected someone to jump out at them at any moment. Finally, they arrived at a small motel in a remote area. The boy's mother rented a room and they settled in for the night. But the boy couldn't sleep. He was too scared. As he lay in bed, he heard a sound outside the door. It was a soft knock. He got up and cautiously opened the door. There was a woman standing there, dressed in all black. She had a gun in her hand. The boy's heart stopped. He recognized her from the wanted posters he had seen on TV. She was a notorious hitman. "You're coming with me," she said, grabbing his arm. The boy struggled, but she was too strong. She dragged him out of the motel room and into a waiting car. As they drove away, the boy's mother appeared out of nowhere, chasing after them. She was yelling and screaming, but the hitman just laughed. "You're too late," she said, grinning. "We've got your son." The boy was terrified. He didn't know what was going to happen to him. But he knew he had to stay strong. As they drove, he tried to think of a way to escape. He looked out the window, trying to find some kind of landmark that might help him. And then he saw it. A sign for a rest stop. He knew he had to act fast. As they pulled into the rest stop, he waited until the hitman was distracted, then he made a run for it. He ran as fast as he could, his heart pounding in his chest. He could hear the hitman yelling at him to stop, but he didn't look back. He just kept running. He spotted a truck parked in the rest stop and ran towards it, hoping to find help. He pounded on the door, begging for someone to let him in. The driver, an older man with kind eyes, opened the door and pulled him inside. "What's going on, son?" he asked. The boy was breathless and scared, but he managed to tell the man what had happened. The man listened carefully, then nodded. "I'll help you," he said. He started the truck and drove away from the rest stop, hoping to lose the hitman in the process. The boy huddled in the seat, feeling both relieved and terrified. He had escaped, but he didn't know what was going to happen next. Hours passed as the boy and the driver drove through the night. The boy kept thinking about his mother and wondering if she was okay. He couldn't imagine what she was going through. Finally, they arrived at a small town. The driver pulled into a gas station and handed the boy a phone. "Call your mother," he said. The boy dialed his mother's number, his heart racing. After several rings, she answered. "Mom," he exclaimed, relief flooding through him. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice shaking. "I'm okay," he said. "But where are you? Are you okay?" There was a long pause. "I'm not okay," his mother said finally. "But I'm alive. That's something." The boy's heart sank. He didn't know what to do. He wanted to help his mother, but he didn't know how. But then he heard a noise behind him. He turned around and saw his mother standing there, tears streaming down her face. "Mom," he cried, running into her arms. They held each other tightly, both of them crying. The boy didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure: he would do anything to protect his mother.